agenda, this is the topic that we were discussing today. So our first topic would be the internal audit need and the scope. So this is the first topic that we will discuss. So before discussing this topic, let me tell you what is the internal audit. First, we will discuss what is internal audit. Okay. So after that, we will discuss all these agenda points. Now, our first topic is what is internal audit. So suppose guys, if I ask you what is internal audit, like if you word this if you think about this word internal audit, what comes into your mind? Let me tell you what is internal audit. So for in any organization there are three line of defense. The first line of defense, like the manager and the staff, these are the person who perform the actual task. So this is the first line of defense. Okay. And the second line of defense is the risk and management compliance. So in every organization you have seen that there is a separate department of compliance department, risk management department. So this department includes the special person who have a specialization in the risk management. And this is the second line of defense. Okay. And now the third line of defense comes, that is the internal audit. So internal audit is a function that provides the independent assurance. Okay. And these functions work on both the two line of defense. So this is our third line of defense. Okay. Now this is the brief, like what is internal audit. So if somebody asks you in one word what is internal audit, you can say that internal audit is a third line of defense. Okay. So after this three line of defense, there is a external audit and there is a regulator audit also. So this is the brief about internal audit. I got some correct answers as well, like this internal audit done by internal employees. Then we do this internal audit to check and verify all the policies and processes are in fact. So all these are correct only. But suppose if somebody asks you like in very short term what is internal audit, then we can say it is a third line of defense in any organization. Okay. So this is the brief about internal audit. Now we'll discuss our first topic, that is internal audit need and the scope. Why do we need internal audit? Okay, so the first need, like internal audit help the board of director and executive management to protect their asset, their reputation and sustainability of the organization. As we discussed guys, we do internal audit on a regular basis. So when we do an internal audit, then we get some control deficiency, when then we get some findings. So this help the board of director and the executive management to protect their assets, their reputation and their sustainability of organization. So this is the first need. Okay. Second, it improves the efficiencies of operation. So like when we do internal audit, then we come up with some findings and the process needs to be improved. So this outcome will help us to improve our efficiency of operations. So this is also a need. Then the third is it provides the independent and unbiased insight. So as we discussed in the previous slide guys, internal audit is a third line of defense. Okay. So this provides the independent and unbiased insight. Like in first line of defense there are the manager who actually perform that task. So they might hide some process gaps or whatever the deficiency is there in the processes. But when the internal auditor do the audit, it provides the independent and unbiased insights, like whatever he observed, whatever the process gap that he want to highlight to the board and the executive management, he provides his insights after doing the audit. So this is the need of internal audit. Okay. So this is the brief, like what is the need of internal audit. Okay. And like in every organization you have seen that there is a separate department for internal audit. There is a separate department, IAD department, which perform the internal audit. Okay. And some organization also do a cross training of employees, so that every department's employee get trained. So suppose if any organization has a limited resources and they cannot set up the entire internal audit department, they use the cross train employee to perform audit of each department. Okay guys, so this is the brief about internal audit need. Now we'll discuss the internal audit scope. Like, when you decide the scope of internal audit, what are the things that you need to consider, that we will discuss in this slide. Okay, so in setting up the scope, internal audit should take into account business strategy and should form an independent view of whether the key risk of the organization have been identified, including emerging and systematic risk, and how efficiently this risk are being managed. So in this paragraph, like, before setting up the scope of internal audit, we need to take business strategy into account, and basis on our business strategy we'll need to define the scope of internal audit. Okay, so this is first point. And the second point is internal audit scope should be unrestricted. So whatever scopes you have decided, like suppose in this year you want to do a data privacy audit, or you want to do the ITGC audit. So whatever scope that has been decided, that scope should be unrestricted. Okay. So the scope of audit should be unrestricted. This is the second point. And whatever finding that has been observed in the internal audit, that finding should be reported and should be presented to the board and the committee. Okay. And the third point is the internal audit plan should have a flexibility to deal with unplanned event to allow emerging risk to be prioritized. So in this point, I want to discuss that, suppose if you have prepared your audit plan. Okay, like in our later slide we will discuss how the audit plan and all is prepared. So once the audit plan is prepared, the audit plan should be flexible to deal with. Suppose if there is some risk has been observed after the audit plan is prepared, so we need to accordingly modify the audit plan to deal with the unplanned event. So this is the third point. Like, so our audit internal audit scope should be flexible to deal with any unplanned event. So suppose, like, audit plan is prepared at the start of the year. So in audit plan, suppose you have decided that you will do this for audit, but during the financial year, you have noted some deficiency in other area which was not there in the audit plan. So your audit plan should be flexible enough to include that in current year audit. So this is the third point. Okay, so now we'll discuss the input and output of internal audit. So what is the input, what is the output, that we will discuss. So input here means like how the internal audit is initiated. What are the different areas, or what are the different source from which internal audit is initiated. So that we'll discuss in the input part. So first is the output of risk assessment. So as you guys are aware that every organization perform the risk assessment. Okay, so basis on risk assessment, suppose if any organization has noted some deficiency in particular area, like suppose there is a area procurement to pay or order to sales, whatever the area, organization has performed their risk assessment, and after the risk assessment they have noted some deficiency in that area. So now basis on that output, organization may say that this we will include in our audit, next year audit or current year audit, this area we will include. So this can be the one input to initiate the internal audit. Okay, now the second input is recommendation from audit team. As we discussed guys, in every organization there is a separate internal audit department. Okay, so suppose internal audit department recommend you to do some audit, or do audit of particular area. From that recommendation also, that internal audit can be initiated. And third is a deficiency observed in process. For example, any process owner is doing process as per the daily routine, and he has observed any deficiency, so he will come to the audit department and he will tell that guys, I have noted this deficiency, there might be some other deficiency, so please initiate that areas audit in current year audit. Okay, so likewise there are this input from which internal audit can be initiated. I have noted down only three. So this all are the input, various input from which audit can be initiated. Now we'll discuss like output of the audit. What will be the output of that audit? So output includes the reports and the information that are formally prepared and presented by one party to another, as well as output that can arise from the auditing process that are generally not visible to those outside the audit organization. So output is basically simple. Whenever you perform the audit, you need to submit the report. So report includes your key findings, what are the recommendation, what is the risk, what is the management response, what is the tat to close that particular observation. So all that thing will be included in your report. So output here means simple, like the final report. Whenever you do audit, you need to submit the report. So this is very generic, I think everyone is aware about this. Yeah, so output like is a simple the report that you need to submit, and what are the key things that is included in the report, guys? So, okay, fine. So this is the input and output of internal audit. Now we'll discuss the importance of internal audit for GRC. Like someone has asked like, is there any difference between internal audit and GRC? So that we will discuss in this slide. So before we discuss this point, let me ask you, what do you mean by the governance, guys? What is the governance? Tell me. As per your understanding, what do you mean by the governance? In these slides, there are three topics actually. One is the governance, another is the risk, and third is the compliance. So first we'll discuss the governance. Basically, the governance is a set of rules, policies, and process that ensure the corporate activity are aligned to support the business goal. So basically, governance includes the policies, your policies, okay? Then rules, set of rules. Then your framework processes. So all that will be included in the governance, set of policy, standard, and procedure. This is correct. Okay. Now, what do you mean by the risk? Any event which can have an adverse impact on the organization policies, process, or anything that is risk. Risk is a very important aspect to project plan project. So to address the risk, organization have a risk management team, separate risk management team, which identify, which assess and control the risk. Okay. Correct. So, compliance means, guys, whatever the policies, procedure, and set of rule that we have, documented in the governance area, we need to monitor that policy, procedure, and set of rules, and we need to ensure that are complying, like whatever activity that we are performing in day-to-day routine, we are complying with the policy, procedure that has been set during the governance. Okay. So that is the compliance. Now you have understand like what is the GRC, governance, risk, and compliance. Now we'll come to our topic. Importance of internal audit for governance, risk, and compliance. Okay. So our topic is the importance of internal audit for governance, risk, and compliance. So GRC need not to be separate function within the organization, but can be employed with proper collaboration between different departments. So as we have discussed, guys, GRC, this is not a separate function. So we have seen that in the governance, organization set policies, processes, and the procedure that needs to be followed. Okay. So that is the governance part. Then we have discussed the risk part. So in the risk, organization identifies the risk, assess the risk, and they put some control to mitigate the risk. So that is the risk part. And third is the compliance part. So compliance ensure that whatever rules, whatever the policies, whatever standard that has been set in the governance part, that we are adhering to. Okay, so this is the brief about the governance, risk and compliance. Now we need to discuss what is the importance of internal audit for GRC function. So then we have discussed that the GRC is not a separate function within the organization, but it is the effectively employed with proper collaboration between different departments. So that means that GRC function is an integral part of, like internal audit is an integral part of GRC function. Okay. So now the third point is, suppose if you want to implement GRC function in the organization, then we need the proper collaboration between all the department, all the personals like board of director, audit committee, internal audit, external auditor. So if they collaborate, then only we can implement the GRC. So before discussing the actual audit plan, first I want to make this audience understand how the audit plan is prepared. So first we will discuss like how this audit. So guys, before discussing the audit plan, first let me explain you how this audit plan is prepared. Okay. So to prepare the audit plan, the first point is audit head is the one who proposed the audit plan based on the risk assessment. So in every organization there is a internal audit department which is headed by the audit head. Okay. So audit head is the person who proposed the audit plan based on the risk assessment. He does the risk assessment and he take output of that risk assessment, and basis on that he proposes a audit plan to audit committee. Okay, so the second point is audit, he proposes his audit plan to audit committee, then audit committee will discuss on that proposed plan and it provides their approval. Okay, so once the audit plan is approved by the audit committee, this audit plan is presented to board of director. So while presenting the plan to board of director, they will not provide any approval on the same. Plan will be of director for their information purpose only, because the audit plan is already approved in the audit committee. So once it is approved in the audit committee, it is presented to the board of director just for information purpose. Okay, and once it is submitted to the board of director, then the approved plan is intimated to all the HODs. Suppose if in your audit plan you want to do audit for purchase area, purchase department, sales department, marketing department, IT department. This year you have chooses all these three department. Okay, so now this the intimation of that audit will be sent to all the HODs once the plan is approved from the board of director minutes. Okay, meeting. So once it is approved, then it is intimated to all the HODs through audit announcement. So this is how the audit plan is prepared. Okay, so this is how the actual audit plan is prepared. Now, yeah, so in the in the that slide we have discussed like how this audit plan is prepared. Now we will see how the actual audit plans look like. So this is how organization prepares their audit plan. So here you can see the heading as audit calendar. So this is your audit calendar, and Q1, Q2, Q3 and Q4. So this is a quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3 and quarter 4. And these are the areas which they are planning to do the audit in the financial year. So in IT audit, suppose organization has decided to do system audit, so they will do the system audit in Q2, and in Q1 they will do the cyber security audit, and ITGC audit will be covered in Q4. Okay, so this is the IT audit wala part. Now the financial audit. In financial audit, they have decided to perform audit for procure to pay, which is your purchase process. Second is order to cash, which is your sales process. and third is a HR process audit. So this is how the actual audit plan is prepared. Audited, not auditor. Auditor will not prepare the audit plan. Auditor will do the audit. Audit plan is prepared by the audited. Okay, so once this plan is prepared by the audit head, okay, and once it is approved by the audit committee, it will goes to whom? Board of directors. So this is about the actual audit plan and its execution. Okay. Now, follow up to an internal audit. Okay, now we'll discuss the follow up to internal audit. Yeah, so basically, the follow up audit means when you do the internal audit or whatever audit, like irrespective whether it's an internal audit or external audit, whatever observation that has been noted by you during the current year, after like when you perform the same audit on next year, first you need to do the follow up of the previous year's observation. Okay, so whatever observation that has been noted during the previous year, that you need to do follow up whether that observations are closed or not closed. Okay, so how that follow up audits format look like, that is presented to your screen. So that includes the audit observation, what observation that has been noted during the last year, who was the owner, what was the target date that was initially decided to close the observation? What is the current status, whether that observation is still open or whether it is closed? And auditor's remark. Suppose if that observation is open, then auditor need to give remark like what is the current stage and what is the scenario, and then again he need to give the owner names and new target date. So this is how the follow up audit ka format will look like. Okay. Okay, fine, guys. So now we will discuss the very important topic, guys. Actually, this is till now whatever we have discussed is just about the brief of audit. Now we'll start with our new topic, that is a typical ITGC. This is a very important topic. Okay, so before we go to ITGC part, let me repeat the slides. Okay. So this is the actual audit plan and execution. So in audit plan, basically there are four steps. First step is audit head proposes the audit plan based on the risk assessment. So audit head is a someone who had the entire internal audit department. He proposes the audit plan based on the risk assessment. So in every organization there is a separate department who do the risk assessment. So he take output of that risk assessment, and basis on that output or as per his judgment, he prepares the audit plan and he proposes that audit plan to audit committee. Now that audit committee will discuss that proposed plan with all the members and audit head. After the discussion, audit committee will approve that audit plan. And once this audit plan is approved, this audit plan is presented to the board of director. Board of director, uh, this plan is presented to board of director for their information purpose only. They cannot modify that audit plan once it is approved by the audit committee. Okay. And after presenting to the board of director, it will goes to the head of department as a audit announcement that these are the audit that we are planning to do in the current year. And then we have discussed that this is how the actual audit plan look likes. Okay. Yeah, so now we'll discuss the ITGC. Okay, as I have seen that very few of you are from IT audit, so we'll discuss this all topic like very in very layman language. So I will start with A, B, C, D in every control. So ITGC is information technology general control, and ISMS is information system. So like both are same only. Like so it depends. Like suppose in ITGC, if you have decided to cover three control, that is your user access management, incident management, or change management. So in ITGC, generally the control the scope would be more from the control side. Like in ISMS audit, you can see some cyber security related control, like your endpoint, your antivirus, your firewall. So it is a more technical, and ITGC focuses more on the policy procedure part. So this is a slight difference between ITGC and ISMS audit. Now we will discuss the ITGC. So in ITGC, the first control is access to program and data. Okay. In access to program and data, the first point is user access creation. So first point is user access creation, review and revocation. So guys, before we will discuss this, let me tell you what is the meaning of access to program and data. Okay, so everyone has seen, like every organization is using some application to perform the accounting, to perform some activity, correct? So suppose we can take any example. Suppose if you want to log into your Gmail account, at the time of login you need to provide some user ID and password, correct? So that is the access to Gmail account. Similarly, in organization, suppose if you are logging into SAP through your user ID and password, so that is covered in the access to program and data. So I am telling you the brief about what do you mean by access to program and data, and then we will discuss each control in detail. Now the first is user access creation, review and revocation. So first control that we are discussing here is user access creation, review and revocation. Like as I told you, in every application there is a user ID and password. Okay, so first we are discussing how the users are created and how the access rights were assigned to that user, and we need to do a periodical review of that user access. So to do this activity, first you need to ask the user access management policy from the organization. Like whenever you do any audit, the first step will be you will refer the organization's policies and process that has been documented, correct? So first you will ask that policy, you will go through that policy and you will check what are the controls implemented around the user creation. Okay, user creation here means, suppose if you have joined a new organization and you want access to the application. Suppose you have joined in the finance department and now you want the access of SAP application. So SAP team will create your user access into the application. So whatever controls related to that user creation will be the part of user access management policy. Okay, so it includes the new user creation and assigning addition right to existing user. Okay, so in the control, like in this control, user access creation, review and revocation, as an auditor, what are the key things that you will check? Yeah, so basically segregation of duty means, suppose if you are doing any transaction, if you are passing any entry into SAP, so generally there is a one maker who will initiate that transaction and there is someone who is checker of that transaction. So this ensure the segregation of duties actually. Segregation of duties means whatever process that needs to be completed, it is assigned to the person who is authorized to do that activity. So it ensures the segregation of duty between the employees. Okay, sometimes what happens, the organization's size is not very big, so one person perform the entire transaction. So that is something which you need to think the practical also. Like suppose if you are doing audit of small organization and in which you have noted there is a one person who is making the transaction and same person is also approving that transaction, so this is a violation of SOD rule. But you also need to give thought on the practical aspect, whether what the size of organization is small or large. Like suppose if the number of employee in that organization is 20, so we cannot expect that every control is divided between those 20 employees. So we need to check the practical aspect also. Okay, and we also need to check what are the compensatory control that has been implemented. whether they are reviewing that logs or something like that. So that is the segregation of duty. These are the control that they will check in the user access creation, review, and revocation. Now let me also revise all this. So whenever you do this review, first you need to take the user access management policy. You need to go through that entire policy, and you need to check who is the approving authority, and you also need to check some sample transaction of new user creation, and you need to check whether they are approved by as per the user access management policy or not. Okay, this is the one control that you will check. Then second control is segregation of duty. You need to ask the user dump. User dump is a like user dump is the user dump will contain the list of user along with the access right assigned to them, and you need to go through that dump, and you need to check whether is it is there any violation of SOD or not. So suppose if there is any maker checker right assigned to one person, you need to ask the business justification for the same, and then you need to arrive at a segregation of duty. Then second is a user access review, whether organization perform the user access review or not. That also you need to check. So let me tell you what is the meaning of user access review. So user access review means, suppose you have assigned some rights to users, like in suppose in SAP application there are 20 users. In this 20 users we have assigned the rights as per their daily work routine or as per their designation. Okay, we have assigned all the rights to this user. Now, suppose after 1 year, we need to check whether whatever access rights were assigned to those user are current or not. So, as I given you some examples, suppose is there any person who has left the organization out of 20? Suppose one person has left. We need to ensure that whatever access rights were assigned to those user were revoked or not. Okay, so that we need to check at the time of user access review. And we also need to check whether that access right were assigned to that user is required to perform his day-to-day activity or not. So all these things will be covered in the user access review. Okay, now the fourth control that we will check is the access revocation. So as we discussed, suppose if any employees leaves the organization, we need to ensure that on or before his last working day, his access rights were revoked or not. This we need to check as an auditor. Okay, so these are some critical controls that you check while performing the user access review of user access creation, review, and revocation. Okay, this is a something which is a practical difficulty you face while doing the audit, which is correctly highlighted. So I will give you the same example. So suppose if you have if there is some person to whom the XYG access right were assigned. Okay, and suppose if that person leaves the organization, but that person was a KMP, which is a key managerial person, and his access ID is required to be retained for certain period of time. Okay, the management has told that suppose CFO has leave the organization and his ID needs to be created for certain period of time. In that case, you need to check whether the exception approval were taken or not to retain that ID. This exception approval you need to check as an auditor. What kind of log? Logs means the application log. Suppose if you are checking access right of SAP application, then you will check the logs of SAP application. But you need to check the application log. Admin has all the rights. Admin, suppose if any person has an admin right, then he can do anything. Admin access is a super user access actually. So now we will discuss the password and authentication control. Okay. So before we will discuss this, I think everyone is aware about the password control. Like suppose if you are using any Gmail also at that time also along with user ID, you need to put some password. So similar to that, suppose in organization also if you are using any application, So that application can be accessed through user ID and the password. Okay. Now we will discuss what are the controls that need to be implemented in the password wala part. Okay, this we will discuss. So in this control also, first as an auditor, what you will ask, first you will ask for the password policy. Whenever you do, audit of any area, organization must, uh, first you need to ask the policy of that control. Okay, boss, please provide me policy and procedure document so that I can refer that document and I can estimate what are the controls that has been implemented. Then you will go through this policy and you will check whether the password complexity were set or not. Okay, first you will check the same in policy. What do you mean by the complexity? As someone has rightly mentioned that the password length, special character, then the minimum character. Okay, so all this will be included in the complexity. The second control is minimum age of the password and the maximum age of the password. Okay, minimum age of password means, suppose today if you have reset your password and in my system it is configured as a 1 day, then you cannot change your password before 1 day. That is minimum age of password. Like for example, suppose today I have changed my password. My earlier password was pass at the rate 123. Okay, now I have changed my password to pass at the rate 1234, and now again I want to change my password as pass at 123. You cannot do, because in your system, suppose minimum age of password is configured as a 1 day, then you need to wait at least for 1 day to change the password. Okay, so this is the minimum age of password. And the maximum age of password is, suppose if maximum age is a 60 days or 90 days, so after 60 days you have to compulsory change the password. That is the maximum age of password. Account lockout, session expiry. So all this will be included in the password related control. Okay, you will check, first you will ask for the password policy and you will check whether all these criteria are defined in policy or not. And suppose whatever criteria is defined in the policy, you need to check the actual implementation also, whatever defined in the policy is actually implemented or not. Okay, this you need to check. This is about the password and authentication control. Any question in the same, guys? Password and authentication control. 2FA is a second factor authentication. For example, suppose if you have login through user ID and password, then you will also get OTP. So second factor can be OTP. Like second factor authentication means, for this I will give you another example actually. So factor authentication, see, I will explain you entire concept. Wait a minute. 2FA. So for every authentication, there is three control. One is something that you know. Something that you know. Second is something that you have. Okay? Something that you have. And third is something that you know, something that you have. And what is third? So these are the three things, okay, for authentication. Something that user have is your user ID and user ID. Okay, user ID and password. Now, no, something that you know is your user ID and password. Okay. Now, second factor is, suppose if you have implemented any biometrics, that after entering the user ID and password, you need to give the biometrics. In laptop now, you can see there is a biometric option. In mobile also there is fingerprinting. So that is something that user are, which is a biometrics. Okay. something that you know is user ID and password actually. And something that you have is your OTP. So after entering the user ID and password, suppose if you get OTP also, this will be a two factor. One factor is user ID and password, and another factor is your OTP. Okay, you are getting my point. What is the 2FA? Basically, out of these three factor,
Yes, yes.
suppose organization has implemented two factor. One is something that you know, and second is something that you have. So these are the two
Okay.
factor through which
Okay.
users are authenticated before logging into the application. Yeah, so suppose if you entered your user ID and password 5 times wrong, suppose you are trying to enter your password and it was wrongly mentioned for 5 times, then your account will be logged. Correct? In Facebook, in Instagram, everywhere this control is implemented. User cannot, continuously try to suppose if any user tries to enter wrong password for certain period of time, then his account will be locked out, temporary suspend. Correct? Okay. It is correctly mentioned that it is account lockout is prevented to brute force attack or dictionary attack. So suppose if any hacker is trying to access your account through brute force or dictionary attack, then this control will prevent hacker to do the same. Now third is a IT segregation of duty and sensitive access control. This we have already discussed, guys. This we have already discussed. Segregation of duty we have already discussed. Now we will discuss the sensitive access. So sensitive access means admin access basically, or super user access. Suppose if any user has a super user access, so as an auditor we need to check like whether this access were assigned to limited person or not. First we will check whether that access is assigned to limited person, whether the logs are getting generated or not. Suppose if any transaction is done by the super user, whether the logs are generated or not, and whether organization performs the log review or not. All these things you will check for the admin access, special privilege. Correct, correct. Rightly mentioned. Yeah. Like same you will do for normal user. In this case also you need to check whether the user access review were done or not. How would you check if SA are not used by someone else? This is something that you cannot do. Like even if you implement all the control, you cannot say that 100% risk will be eliminated. As like you cannot say that this account was not used by someone else. There is no control to stop that. Like suppose if I have the super user access and I have given my ID and password to you, then like auditor cannot do anything. This is something which is beyond the control. Okay, so all this control that you will check in the user access. So this is the admin. Now super user and system user. So in earlier point, we already discussed about the super user and the admin user, and now we will discuss the system user. Okay. So system user are the user which are by default created into the application. So in this case, we will take the example of SAP. Okay, so in SAP, if anyone has observed, there is one account called SAP underscore new. Okay, so this is the account which is by default created into the SAP, and there is another account which is SAP underscore all. So these two user ID are by default created into the application, which is known as a system user. Okay, so in this case, as an auditor, you need to check whether this system user's account is disabled or not. Okay, so you need to check first that whether this account is disabled or not, because this account has all the privilege access. Whatever the system users are there in the application, they have the super user access, and these accounts
are managed by the vendor of application. So as an auditor, you need to check whether that account was disabled or not. The second point that you will check is whether the password were changed or not. When this default accounts are given along with the application, so after that whether the admin has changed the default password or not. Okay, this you need to check. Any transaction after user left with the same user ID. So this is a default account. So this account cannot be deleted from the application. So we cannot check any transaction after the, because this user ID is not assigned to any user. So yeah, but you can check for the logs. This is correct. You need to check whether the log review were done or not for these two account. Okay, or for default account. Now we'll move to the next point, which is audit trail management control. Basically, audit trail is something, suppose if any user is doing any activity in the application, so that activity is logs of activity performed by the user. Yeah, so whatever the logs that has been generated for the edit user activity, that is called the audit trail. So as an auditor, what you need to check? Series of record. Yeah, yeah. First, you need to check whether the logs are generated or not. First, you will check whether all the transactions which are passed in the application, whether the logs are generated or not. Correct. Date and the timestamp. You need to check whether that audit trail includes the date and timestamp. And so this also you will check. Yeah, unusual activity or transaction that has been performed through that user. Correct. We will also check whether the log review were performed or not. This is very important control. We need to check whether organization is performing the audit log review or not. This you need to check. Okay. How do we check log review? So as an auditor, you need to check whether the log review were performed by the auditee or not. Okay, suppose if you do, whenever you do ITGC or any kind of, you need to check whether the control is implemented or not. And suppose if that control is implemented, you need to check the adherence of the same. You will not going to do the log review at on your own. You need to check whether organization has conducted the log review or not. If they have conducted, you need to ask for the evidences, like how this log review were performed, on what frequency they have performed, who has done this review. So all these things you will ask to organization. Okay. Now the next control is database security control. This is one point. Backup and encryption of data. This is also correct. You need to check whether the database backup has been done or not. This we will cover here also in computer operation, data backup and restoration control. But this is right. Backup and restoration and encryption of data. We need to ensure, suppose if there is any PII and SPI data, which is a personal identity information or special personal information of user. So this is the guideline of UIDAI, that whatever PII and SPI data that organization collect, they need to encrypt that data. Okay. So there are some guidelines on the data privacy. That also you need to check whether the data is encrypted or not. Or ports and security group review check. Yeah, this security group review check also you will do. You also need to check whether the hardening review were done or not. Okay. So hardening review is like security control only. So whatever security controls around the database, whether organization is performing hardening review or not. So all these points you will check in the database security control. DB logs, you need to check the logs also. Who has access to that database and whether the log review were done or not. So all these things also you will check. Now this is all about the access to program and data. In access to program and data, we have covered all this control: user access, creation, review, revocation, password control, then segregation of duty, super user, system user, audit trail, database security control. So this is the part of access to program and data. Now we will discuss the change management process, okay, which is program change management. This is our next topic. Okay, so changes in policy, procedure, system, whatever process, it includes your changes to policy, procedure, system, your application, your infra, whatever changes you do, you need to check the change management policy for the same. Okay, understood what is change management? This is the change management. So for example, suppose you have implemented the SAP in organization. Once the SAP is implemented, suppose now user want to incorporate any other module, or suppose is user want to do any changes in the application. So whatever changes has been done, it will be done through change management process. Okay, this is the meaning of change management. Okay, now we will discuss as an auditor what you will be checking in the change management process. Okay, step by step we will go. So first thing you will check as a change request. So change request will contain all the detail why you want to change, who is the person approving the change, what is the need of the change. So that all detail will be included in your CR, which is called CR, change request. So first you need to ask whether the change request was created or not. Okay, type of change, impact. So impact assessment also will be the part of change request. In change request you need to document why the user want to do the changes. So all the rationals will be included in the your CR, which is the change request. Understood? So this is the first step of the change management process. Once the CR is documented, you need to check the approval also. Who has provided the approval on the change request? Okay, emergency change, standard change, normal change, are we have to check? Yeah, so like changes can be classified into different types. So one is a emergency changes. Emergency changes means, suppose first we will discuss the entire change cycle, then we will discuss the type of changes, normal changes and the emergency changes. This we will discuss once we discuss this entire change management. First let me complete this change management ka cycle, and then we will discuss what is the difference between emergency changes and the normal changes. Okay, so first we will discuss this. Once suppose the change request is created, we need to check the approval, whether the change request is approved or not. Development team will start working on the change. Once he get the change request, development team will start working on the change. They will start their working. As a user, this change request will be submitted by whom? This is submitted by the user. Okay, and once it is submitted, then the development team will start working on it. Okay, once the change is developed, what is the next case? In the test environment prior to introduce change in the production. So next step will be the user acceptance testing. Okay, user provides this CR request. Okay, so in the CR request he will mention that what all changes he required to do in the system. All these things will be mentioned in the CR, change request. So in the user acceptance testing, user will check whether whatever the requirement defined in the change request form, that are correctly implemented or not, or whether he want to do some other changes. So once the UAT is done, he will provide the sign off that yeah, now you can move into the production, and this UAT will be done in the test environment. Okay, once the UAT is done, there is another like big organization also do the quality checking. They do the quality checking and security checking also. This check is done by the big organization. Quality check and VAPT check, we can say, like security check. So big organization do this check also before implementing into the production department. Okay, suppose if you are doing some changes, suppose in SAP you are at version number 11. Okay, now you want to move to the version number 12. So suppose while implementing version number 12, if you have not implemented successfully, the system will goes down. So you should have a something backup plan. So rollback plan is your backup plan actually. How you will back up your system to prior version. So that is the rollback plan. So this also you need to document along with the in the change management process. Okay, going back to old change. This is perfect. Okay, once the UAT and quality check is done, what is the next step? The change will be moved to the production. Okay, this is the final step. Once the UAT and quality check is done, the change will be moved to the production environment. Post implementation review. Once the change is implemented into the system, we need to also check whether the post implementation review is done or not. Okay, so in post implementation review you will check like this is performed after certain period of time, like after 10 days or after 1 month. So whatever certain period of time, organization also perform the post implementation review to check whatever changes is implemented into the production environment doesn't affect it application. So this is the general process that we follow in the change management. Now we will discuss the type of changes also. Someone has mentioned about the type of changes. Okay, so generally changes are divided into two categories. Generally changes are divided in two categories. One is a emergency changes and one is a normal changes. Okay, so emergency changes is something that bypasses all the processes which are mentioned here. Suppose if any change bypass all these processes, that change will be called as a emergency changes. Okay, and suppose if any change request which follow all these steps, that is considered as a normal changes. Approval is correctly mentioned. You need to check the post facto approval. In case of changes, post facto approval is taken from the respective stakeholder. Post facto approval is something like approval is taken after the changes is implemented into the production. We also need to check the rationale of the same, whether is it required to implement the emergency changes. Suppose if there is any new release, or suppose your system is down, or suppose your system is hacked by some hacker. At that time, suppose system admin has decided to implement some changes, and he feel that if he will take up the appropriate permission, this will delay the implementation of change, so he will do the emergency changes in this type of scenario. So suppose if any emergency changes were done, he will take the post facto approval from respective authorities that I have done this changes into the system, and since it was the emergency situation, now request you to provide the approval. So all that approval are called post facto approval. Okay, so all these things you will check in the emergency changes. So this is about all about the change management. So in change management also, organization do have their change management policy. So you need to ask for that policy and you need to check what are the controls implemented around that. Okay, done. So this is about the change management. Now we'll discuss the computer operation, in which the first control is a data backup and restoration control. Suppose if you have stored some data on your primary site or primary server, you need to take backup of that primary server. So suppose in case of any emergency, or suppose your primary server is down, you can move to the second. So that is the purpose of taking the data backup. So suppose organization is doing data backup on a daily basis and they are storing their data on the secondary side. And suppose if they don't do the restoration testing, then they will never know, like in case of disaster, whether that data will be recovered or not, that data will be restored or not. To ensure the same, organization also perform the restoration testing. So rightly mentioned that this is the purpose of doing the data restoration. Okay, so now what you will check in the data backup. So first you will ask for the data backup policy and procedure document. In policy and procedure document, you will see what is the backup frequency, what are the system for which backup is taken. All these things you will check in the backup policy and procedure document. Okay. Now, after taking the data backup policy, you will select some sample dates for which you will check whether the backup was performed or not. So you will ask for the backup evidences for sample date, that please provide me whether the backup was done on this date or not. You will ask for the evidence of data restoration testing. You will check whether the data restoration testing were done or not. Okay. Suppose if organization is taking their backup on LTO tape. Okay. So we also need to check security of that LTO tape and hard tapes, whether they are properly secured or not. Access to data backup, who all are the authorized person who have access to data backup also. Okay, this also you will check. Yeah, so that you will check in the backup evidence. So you will ask for the backup evidence na. In that backup evidence they will provide you backup log only. From backup log you can tell whether the backup was performed or not. So this will be the part of this. Now we will discuss the IT, BCP and DR control. Any unexpected event which can be the natural event, which can be the man-made event. Okay. So all these are the example of man-made disaster. So in disaster, we need to check whether our business is continued or not, and what are the processes that is implemented by organization to continue their business. So what is the first point that you will ask? Now, some mentioning about the BIA document, which is very correct answer. Once you get this policy, you will ask for the BIA document. So in business impact analysis, you will do this business impact analysis to identify the critical processes that is necessary to do after to continue your business. So you will identify all the critical processes through BIA, business impact analysis. Now, what is the final outcome of this BIA? What is the outcome? Suppose if you did the BIA, what will you get from this business impact analysis? Recovery point objective. Now, so someone has rightly mentioned it is a acceptable data loss. Now we'll give you one example. See, currently what is the time? Current time is 9:55. Suppose if any disaster occur right now, okay, right now, suppose if any disaster occur and your organization perform backup on hourly basis, okay, organization is doing backup on hourly basis. So when the last backup was done, the last backup was performed at 9 p.m. Okay, last backup, and then the disaster was happened at 9:55 p.m. Now how much data will be lost in this case? 55 minutes. So what is this 55 minutes? This is your RPO. This is the acceptable data loss. Organization has told that we are ready to accept data loss up to 55 minutes. Okay. So this is the once you do the BIE activity, na, this outcome you will get to, like what is my organization RPO and what is my RTO. Now this is RPO. Now let's discuss about RTO. What is RTO? Perfectly, perfect answer. So RTO means how much downtime you can afford. So in the similar case, suppose a disaster was occurred at a 9:55 p.m. Suppose the disaster was happened at a 9:55 p.m. and organization has recovered from this disaster at 10:55 p.m. So between the 9:55 p.m. and 10:55 p.m. the time gap is 1 hour. So 1 hour is my downtime. I cannot do anything in this downtime. So that is my RTU actually. So that is, yeah, correctly mentioned. That is why we do the business impact analysis to check like what is our business RPU and RTU. So this is not something which is industry standard. It depends on organization to organization, and they perform this BIE activity to arrive at a RPU and RTU. Like apart from RPU and RTU, there is some MTD also, which is maximum tolerable downtime, and we cannot afford any given of cost, we need to recover our system within the MTD, which is your maximum tolerable downtime. This is right. Okay. Fine. So this is about the BCP and DR. We have discussed the concept. Now, as an auditor, what you will check? What are the documentation that you will check? Now that we will discuss. Now we will check whether the BCP and DR drill were conducted or not, and we will ask for the evidences whether the BCP and DR were conducted or not. We will also check whether the BIA was reviewed or not. Suppose the BIA was prepared at the time of inception, after whether it was regularly reviewed or not. Similarly, the BCP and DR policy was reviewed or not. All these things you will check. You will also check whether the BCP and DR training were provided to employees or not. Okay. Let me give you one example. Okay, BCP is depending on site location. So in business continuity plan, what we will do, suppose in case of disaster, we will shift our application from primary server to secondary server, or we can say the alternative site. We will move to the alternative site. Okay. So for a time being, our primary site will be down. Okay. In business continuity plan, our main focus is to continue the business. Whatever business or whatever activity that we are doing, we will continue that activity from our alternative side. Okay. Now in disaster recovery, what we will do, whatever disaster occurred at a primary site, we need to recover that primary site. And then we will shift to the primary site. So this is the main difference actually. The DR include your recovery of primary site, and BCP means continue your business from alternative site. This is a main difference actually. You getting my point? Business continuity planning, that means you need to continue your business from alternative side. Once your business will continue, you will also focus to recover your primary site also. That is your disaster recovery. Yeah, this is example only. Now suppose if any disaster is occurred at your primary site, so suppose your primary site at location A. Okay, you can take example of natural. Suppose if you are taking example of natural disaster, then location will come. And suppose if you are taking example of man-made disaster, in that case your server and IT infra will come. So suppose if disaster was happened at location A, now what you will do, you will move from your location A to location B, which is your alternative site. Okay, because you need to continue your business. So to continue your business, you will move to the location B, which is your alternative or secondary site. From there, you will continue your business. So that will be treated as your business continuity planning. Now, suppose at location A, whatever disaster was occurred, you also need to recover this location A also. Na? Once you have shifted to location B, you also need to start working on repair of location A. So that will be form part of your disaster recovery. Understood? Yeah. Now we'll discuss the practical difficulty that auditor face. So now we'll discuss some interesting topic, like what are the top pain areas for internal audit and what is their solution. So these two topics are purely like, practical topic. Let me share my full screen. Yeah, so first is internal audit budget and resource allocation by senior management and the board. Yeah. So what is the first pain point actually? Like in every organization, there is a budget constraint for internal audit department. Actually, your internal audit department is cost center for organization. So, there is always some restrictions in setting up the budget. So management also tries to set, lower budget for internal audit department. So this is a first top, first pain area for internal audit. And but nowadays, organizations are giving proper importance to internal audit. So now these cases are decreasing. But yeah, obviously this is a first pain area. Then second is the internal audit scope and scope definition. So suppose whenever you do any internal audit, at that time the first thing that you think like what would be the scope, how I will define my scope. So that is also a pain point for internal audit. So scope definition, your IAD head will be included. So he will guide us like what would be the scope of that internal audit area. So this is also a pain point, like defining the scope of internal audit. Then third is a communication of importance and submission of finding. Whenever you perform the audit, it is equally important that you communicate the same to higher management also. So your internal audit report should be goes till board of director, whatever activity were performed, whatever things that you have observed during the audit. So all these things will be reported to the higher management also. Okay. Now, fourth is an action plan based on internal audit findings and follow-up. So whatever finding that you have observed during the audit, for all that finding, you also need to take an action plan from the respective auditee. Like whosoever is a spoke, like whosoever is a responsible to implement that finding, you also need to take an action plan. And sometimes internal auditor also suggest like this will be the remedial action. So this is also a pain point for now the selection of right personnel for auditor role. Like suppose in your internal audit department there are 5 people, and you want to do audit of HR. So you need to select from that 5 people like who is going to perform that activity. So selection of right person is also important, like someone who did this audit prior. So we will try to give that audit to person. So as the internal audit head, he also need to ensure that whatever person that is choose to do that audit, that person should have a necessary knowledge to perform that activity. So these are the some of areas which I feel that these are the painful area for internal audit. So fine, in some technical cyber attack scenario where auditor leaking of knowledge, yeah, so it depends, like the selection of right personnel is for that only. Suppose if you want to conduct any IT audit, then you need to assign that audit to someone who has a IT knowledge. Otherwise, the person who don't have any knowledge, how you can expect that person to do audit and give some interesting finding, getting acceptance and approval on finding and see in closing meeting. Now we will discuss the key challenges that auditor faces during the audit and what are the solutions for the same. So these are the some key challenges which I have faced during the audit and which we will discuss. So first is the evidence creation only for the purpose of audit. I can give you hundred of example, like how auditee, suppose when we perform an audit, so auditee will start creating of that evidence. So we'll give you some example. So in this ITGC control, we come across one control which is user access review, correct? So in user access review, what we will check as an auditor, whether the user access review were done or not. How the user access review is done? User access review is done like user will take the user dump from the application, and he will check whether that user exists in the organization. So that he will check from the HR list, HR dump. Okay, he will reconcile both the users name, like whether user is existing in HR dump versus application dump. He will do the reconciliation. Okay, and he will also check whatever access rights were assigned to that users are current or not. This this activity is done by the auditee. Okay, now suppose as an auditor you have asked this evidence, you have asked for the evidence of user access review. Okay boss, give me some evidence of user access review. So generally what will happen, this review is performed over the email, like when I ask for the evidences, I always ask auditee from to provide email evidences, because suppose this activity is done on a half yearly basis. So in audit financial year 2021 to 2022, we need to check that this activity was performed twice or not. So I have asked for the email evidence. Boss, that please provide me email evidence where you have done this working and you have shared the same with application HOD. Okay, whosoever is handling that application, whether you have done that activity and you have shared or not. So what auditee has reverted me that, boss, I have not done this activity over the email. I have done that activity physically, and he has provided me some uh, hard copy of this user dump, and on that hard copy it was signed by that person and the application owner as well. Now as an auditor, I cannot say that this hard copy and this review was done during the year. Like auditee can prepare this evidence after 2022 also. Like I don't have any, a way to check out whether this activity was done during the year or it was done after the audit when I have asked this evidence. So sometime auditee prepare the evidences just for the purpose of audit. You can ask for the user dump which was existed on 30th September 2022, and you can compare this dump with this dump. Sometime auditee sometime auditee will take the latest dump, okay, and then he will just do the signature and all. So you can compare this user dump with the user dump which was there in the system, because suppose if any employee who have joined after the September, that employee will be presented in the latest dump, but he will not presented in 30th September. So you can compare both the user list, and suppose if you found any discrepancy, so you can question auditee like why this user was coming in the review of 30th September, like he has not joined the organization, and why it is coming in this user access review. So likewise you can question, and then auditee will accept, yeah boss, this was prepared after the audit requirement. So likewise you can do data validation, what from whatever points that comes into your mind, like how do I validate. So I did likewise, like someone else can do an other method also. I did this method. I have compared that physical copy with user dump as on 30th September, and then I found some user which was not there as on 30th September, but still presenting in this hard copy. So I asked them that, like why these users are coming into the user access review. Then he told me that it was prepared after your audit. Likewise he has accepted. But suppose if auditee was smart and he has taken the correct dump, then you cannot question or counter the auditee. So this is the first point: evidence creation only for the purpose of audit. Now second point is not sharing the relevant data. Sometimes what happens, suppose if you have asked some evidences, like you have asked to share the password policy of domain, and he is providing you password policy of application, so which is not relevant. You have asked some other evidence and audit is sharing you something else only. So at that time you need to discuss with the auditee, and you need to take the correct evidence or correct data which you require for validation. So this also, like I have noticed various time, whenever I float any data requirement, auditee will start sharing data which is not anywhere related to my data requirement. This is second point. Now this also many auditee will do, sharing majority of pending data at the time of closure or final report submission date. Suppose there is a regulatory requirement that you need to perform the system audit within the 6 month of closing of financial year. This is the timeline which is defined by the IRD or any regulator for the sake of. So what auditee will do, he knows that audit by anyhow auditor need to perform this audit within the 6 month of completion of financial year. And you have initiated your review in the month of April or May, whatever time. Okay, but auditor will not share you data, because he knows that suppose if I start sharing data now, then auditor will do some more data analysis and he may come across with some queries. Okay, so what auditor will do, they will share you data at the time of closure. Like suppose if 7 days are remaining, then he will share you entire data. Okay, then you need to validate that data, and you also need to whatever query that has been observed, you also need to discuss the same with auditing. So likewise they will try to manipulate the thing so that auditor will not do proper data analysis and all. This also I have faced many a time. Like, now the last point is discussion with auditor regarding audit observation risk rating, high, medium or low. So whenever, suppose after audit, whenever you come across with any finding, you need to give the severity, like whether that finding is high, or whether that finding is medium, or whether it is a low. So suppose if you have given your report to auditee and you have categorized that finding as a high, then auditee will start, he will ask you about the justification why you have put it as a high. Can you please modify it to the medium, or can you please categorize this finding as a low? So at that time you also need to give proper justification, because without justification you cannot decide the severity. So you also must have some justification around this severity. So you will provide your justification that boss, due to this reason I have categorized it as a high. So then auditor will again argue with you that we have a this control implemented, we have that compensatory control, so you cannot treat this observation as a high, please reclassify it to the medium. So this also I have faced many a time. So this is something that I have faced during the audit. Okay, at the time of selection of service between two entity, we do a vendor risk assessment. For the in the vendor risk assessment, we note down the pros and cons of both the vendor. Like suppose in one case the cost would be lower but services would be better, in second vendor the cost would be higher. So likewise we do the vendor assessment. Like there is no formula, or second, you can ask someone who is already availing the services of another vendor. Like suppose if you, in example, suppose if you want to switch your mail from one vendor to second vendor, so is there any person in industry who is already using that mail account to services? You can ask about. And in your organization also there must be separate a procurement team or vendor risk assessment team who do the analysis and all. So that result will also help you to take decision whether to move from first to second or not. It will be there in the contract SLA. If you have signed the SLA agreement with the first party, in SLA we clearly mention that what would be the notice period. Like if suppose if we don't want to avail your services, how much prior we need to intimate you. So that will be there in the SLA agreement. You need to follow. I think we are done with the session. I really enjoyed talking to you all, interactive in the session, and I really enjoyed. And thank you for attending the session. And